Hi there, I'm Tealbald, I'm a content creator on YouTube, and I appreciate you all taking the time to learn about disabilities. This is a wonderful step in the right direction, so thank you. Dyspraxia is a weird disability. I'm sure you've all heard of dyslexia, as that's more commonly known, but in case you aren't aware, the Oxford English Dictionary defines it as a general term for disorders that involve difficulty in learning to read or interpret words, letters, and other symbols, but does not affect general intelligence. So you may find it hard to count, or letters may get jumbled up, so it becomes hard to read. This is going to be a fun script for me to read for this video. According to research, 9 to 12% of the world are dyslexic, myself included, with 2 to 4% seriously affected. So we're looking at over 700 million people with dyslexia in the world. That's obviously quite a lot. No wonder most people know about it. Dyspraxia is very different. Similarly to dyslexia, it doesn't affect general intelligence, but instead affects other aspects like coordination and balance. So for me, I find it hard to ride a bike with stabilizers. It affects how you learn new skills, it affects how you write, type, draw, and grasp small objects. It can affect how you function in social situations, how you deal with emotions, how you deal with time management, and the list goes on. Surprisingly, there are apparently 5 to 10% of the population of the world who are dyspraxic, but I think it's one of those things people sort of brush off, because I don't hear people talking about it. It doesn't even have a little section on Google from the Oxford English Dictionary when you ask for a definition, if that's any indication. Now, there is a third one that sort of falls into this bracket of disability, and that's Irlen syndrome. Irlen syndrome can affect many different areas, including academic and work performance, behaviour, attention, ability to sit still, concentration, and more. That is correct! I have the full package! Yay! For me, concentration is the biggest thing. I'll be in a room and I'll look like I'm listening, but I've sort of completely zoned out. I'm not thinking of anything else, I'm just not there, even though I look no different. Honestly, creating YouTube videos and streaming games has helped me to get a lot better at carrying on, sort of like I'm on autopilot. It doesn't last long for me, usually like 10 to 20 seconds, sometimes less, but 20 seconds is a long time. I will state that, on my end, this never happens to me when I'm walking anywhere, so I'm not a danger when I'm in the road, but I do not drive for fear of this. As with all of these disabilities, other people who have it will be affected far more severely, or will barely notice any changes, so some of the problems I deal with may be incredibly tame compared to someone else. Please don't just use my word on these disabilities, ask people with varying severity, because there is so much more to learn about my own disabilities than even I don't know about. When I was a kid, I went through a lot of exercises to get better at dealing with dyspraxia. I had to write sentences constantly on a device that raised paper at an angle, as I personally find writing very difficult. My handwriting is awful, as you can see here. There's a little more to it than that. I find pressure a problem, and by that I mean when I hold a pen or a pencil, I hold it in a way that physically hurts my hands. Apparently my teacher made me switch to a whiteboard as I was pressing so hard I was making marks in the table. I guess the easiest way to describe it would be holding hands with someone. I may intend to gently hold their hand, but could unintentionally be squeezing without realising. Why did I do that? It really hurt. I also had to learn how to throw a juggling ball to someone and back, throwing and catching for months to train my motor skills to get much better. Not perfect, sure, but better. Now, where does gaming come into all this? Well, gaming is actually incredibly helpful for my fine motor skills. When I was growing up, playing games, especially 3D platformers on the PS1, like Crash, Spyro, Croc, Bugs Bunny Lost in Time, and more, really helped me get an understanding of movement, and taught me minor precision through difficult platforming that I couldn't do outside of games. But games have evolved, and with that we've seen wonderful accessibility options, especially in the last few years. But seemingly one big advancement has made dyspraxics' life difficult. I am talking about the analog controller. I mentioned I have a difficulty with balance, and grasping small objects is a challenge for us. Whilst you don't grasp an analog controller, basically we're combining those two handicaps in one. If I want to go directly up, I can do that, but sometimes I'll veer slightly left or right. Additional movement options add more depth to a game, but it does make precise tasks a nightmare. I have some very specific examples for you that will hopefully help you understand why this is a problem, but I will also offer a solution. As I mentioned earlier, I used to love playing the PS1 Crash games. Thanks to Crash being brought back into the spotlight, we've seen a sequel to Crash Warped with Crash 4 It's About Time. Crash 4 has a lot of precise movement, especially for time trials, which obviously is easier with analog. I could never do this with an analog stick. The D-pad may only have 4 directions, but you can of course move in diagonals by hitting 2 buttons at once, which I find much simpler. I can feel where my thumb is, I know which one I'm on and how to control that. Not so with an analog controller. Thankfully, Crash 4 actually does allow you to use a D-pad, so in this instance, that isn't an issue. That said, massive respect to the GameCube controller. It has grooves in every direction surrounding its analog controller, so I'll have a better understanding of where I'm aiming. Speaking of aiming, first-person shooter aiming is pretty difficult. Having the precision I need to get a headshot is quite tough. It is easier with a mouse, but I personally can't get used to WASD movement. So many keys next to each other gets my fingers lost, and I'll hit the wrong keys. That's probably more a combination of Erlen's and the need to fidget a lot, but I digress. I've been playing the Horizon games by Guerrilla Games, and there's a handy slow down time feature. I find when that's in play, I have a much simpler time with aiming. Something like that could be a really helpful accessibility option for FPS titles in the future. I wouldn't know what the solution to this is, maybe making the button combination a rhythm thing, but fighting games are pretty much impossible for me, at least if I want to enter a competitive scene. Asking me to do a bunch of diagonals is not really possible. I'll just mash buttons and fling the analog in certain directions and hope for the best. Finally, I want to talk about 2D platformers. Depending on how precise they want you to move left and right, sometimes I don't move on certain 2D games with an analog controller. Same applies for racing games. If I need to do a hard right and accidentally unknowingly go on a diagonal, I'm not going to make that corner fully. But back to 2D platformers, I want to discuss the recently released Metroid Dread. If you're going for 100%, there are sections with the speed boots and the shine spark technique. These segments are difficult enough as it is, but as someone who has to navigate and shoot at perfect accuracy at speed, this became one of the most infuriating gaming experiences I've ever had. I've called it Hell for a Dyspraxic, and I stand by it because of analog movement. Simply shooting in a straight line whilst moving is incredibly difficult. Add platforming to the mix, and that's just impossible. But how do you fix this? I'm aware that dyspraxia isn't exactly a severe disability, but gaming is still made harder for us, and there's a very easy fix for almost every game out there. With a game like Metroid Dread, you can't use the D-pad because the D-pad has a separate function. One button reveals secrets, another lets you see the map a little bigger, so you can't use it to make the Shine Spark segment easier. Or can you? How about an accessibility option that just switches the D-pad and analog functions? Why can't the secret or map option button be on the analog? It doesn't alter the game in any way whatsoever, and would make it incredibly easy and more helpful to the apparently 10% of us who will benefit from this. Thank you so much for taking your time to listen to what I have to say. You're going to make a lot of people's lives a lot easier. I really appreciate it. Thank you.